I was living in Columbus, Ohio, which is about 2 hours south of Canton, where Dad lived. We would talk about 3 times a week on average. We were close. When I got the call that night, I had a neighbor over, and he and I were putting together an entertainment center I had just bought. And everything was fine, and then the phone rang, and it was my brother. And he said, I just want to let you know, Dad's house is on fire, and it doesn't look good. And he said, I'll call you back when I have more information. And I kept trying to call him, and he didn't answer. I just didn't know what to do.
Becky Angelo is terrified for the safety of her 87-year-old father, Benny, who lives alone in the old family home.
Benny was a local celebrity. Everybody knew Benny. Everybody loved Benny. He had deep, deep roots to veterans organizations. A World War II Pearl Harbor veteran, they're the toughest of the tough, right?
Fire investigator Joe Carafelli rushes to Benny Angelo's burning house, well aware that lives are likely at stake. Carafelli's firefighting colleagues are already in the house.
They didn't want to waste any time with getting in and trying to get him out of there. Minutes, seconds, there was pretty much zero visibility because it was very smoky. And he was basically just going by feel as he crawled through there. Found the bedroom. Of course, that's one of the first places you look. Felt up on the bed, felt Mr. Angelo, and immediately pulled him out and tried to get him outside. He didn't notice any signs of life, couldn't hear him breathing. There was no coughing or response from him. Once he got him out, that's when the paramedic was trying to resuscitate him.
But it's too late. Benny Angelo is dead.
We look in the mouth to see if there was any soot in the mouth. There did not appear to be much soot at all in the mouth or the nose, which indicated that he was deceased prior to the fire.
Carafelli carefully enters the smoldering house.
We had to determine every possible competent heat source that could start a fire and then rule those out one by one. The stove was ruled out. We rule out the hot water tank. We look at the electrical system of the house. In the front room, it was basically just cluttered there. You know, you had some chairs and furniture and boxes, pictures of him as a proud soldier, pictures of him with his family. It looked like stuff had been rummaged through and thrown aside. And the tables were upended and there were chairs piled up on it. There were several liquor bottles laying around and there were strange burn patterns. You could see what appeared to have been liquor that was splashed around and then lit.
Those suspicious burn patterns tell Carafelli that the fire was almost certainly started deliberately.
You went into the bedroom, you could see where Mr. Angelo took his last breaths. And there was some blood and stuff on it. And there was a safe open right there at the foot of the bed. And it just kind of telltale, you know. It looked like we had a crime scene here.
I felt that somebody knocked on his door, got inside his house, allowed somebody else or some other people to come in. So with that, he possibly knew the person who was trying to get into the house. There was no pry marks on the safe. There was no tooling marks, nothing that indicated that there was force applied to the safe. Inside the safe, we were able to find a handgun that belonged to Benny. I spoke to the family in reference to this handgun and asked, did he have any other firearms? And they told me that he kept a revolver next to his bed, always. And it was a .32 caliber revolver. It was missing.
Mr. Angelo was transported from the scene. When I got to the hospital, one of the first things that the doctor talked to me about was that they did have what appeared to be puncture wounds, most likely bullet holes. I think as far as everybody was concerned at this point, somebody forced Mr. Angelo to open the safe and then shot and killed him. then set the fire to cover it up.
The coroner's report confirms that Benny has been shot 4 times, once in the head and 3 times in the chest.
He was shot and killed with a .32 caliber revolver, believed to be the one belonging to Mr. Angelo.
To be killed with your own gun in your own home, that's a hard pill to swallow,
Even though Benny was 87 years old, he was in good health.
That's why I believe there was more than one person, because I think it had to be, because it would have taken more than one person to take my dad out. That's the type of, it's just, he had such a strong spirit.
But against all odds, one potentially valuable clue survives.
Our identification bureau was able to find a hair in the front door mechanism, one single hair. That hair appeared to be blonde. I know the family of Benny Angelo, and they're all dark-haired. Benny had white hair, but he had very short hair. Why is there a blonde hair in the mechanism of the door? That was a huge lead for us. I believe that belonged to the person who entered the residence and ultimately assaulted him.
Detective George sends the hair to the lab for DNA analysis.
An elderly gentleman who was just cleaning up his debris, and underneath a bush, he rakes out the old dead leaves and he finds a brown leather holster and a wallet with Benny Angelo's ID in it. I would say the way the crow flies, it was probably 1,500 feet from Mr. Angelo's house.
The find is their best lead yet.
What the discovery of those items did for us was show us a path that one of the persons that left Mr. Angelo's house was walking and discarded those items under some bushes so nobody would ever find them.
Months pass with no new leads. The case of the murdered war hero goes as cold as the winter winds that blow across Ohio. Becky Angelo does not give up her fight for justice, doing anything she can to keep her father's case alive.
Just one night, I thought, okay, I think we've put flyers on every telephone pole and business and wasn't really doing anything. And I just figured people in jail brag and talk, so let's go there. I just attached a little 8x10 poster with a note to the sheriff, please post this in your jail.
They were hung up right in the receiving area where you bring a prisoner in. And in May of 2012, I received what they call a kite. So I went out there to meet with this young lady, and she told me that she's in a pod cell with a young girl whose name was Regina Crank, talking about the murder of Benny Angelo and that her cousin was involved. Now, I was able to interview Regina on the same day. Regina told me that she was at a party and her cousin was there, Chester Crank. Apparently, she was raised with Chester like brother and sister. They were very close growing up. So he trusted her. He had been drinking, and he had mentioned to her and other people that he is going to go to prison for the rest of his life for shooting and killing somebody. And that somebody was Benny Angelo. Chester Crank was somebody that wasn't even on our radar. This is something fresh, something new. I mean, I was enthused.
More like Chester, Crank. I've never heard of the name. That name never meant anything to any of us. We had no idea who this person was.
2 more inmates see Becky's posters and tell police similar stories about Chester Crank's involvement with Benny Angelo's murder.
I did my due diligence on Chester Crank. He had a handful of felonies. I found out that Mr. Crank lived on 19th Street and Harrisburg Road.
Crank's address makes sense. It's close to Benny's house and the spot where his holster and wallet were found.
So the pieces, to me, were starting to come together on this case. I asked Regina if I was able to get her released from here. Would she be willing to wear a recording device and go out with Chester Crank? You know, I told her there's a reward put out by the family if you get an arrest and a conviction out of it. But if you mess up, you're going right back in. She was more than willing to do it.
Chester, what is wrong? You got me scared.
You said somebody?
No, you didn't.
Yes, I
Who?
did. Yes, I did. I promise you.
Dude, my heart's racing. No, you did
I
not.
promise you. They can never prove it.
You did not kill
Yes, I
somebody.
did.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did. Took his life.
You did.
Took him like a bitch, yep. Yep. I let my homies watch it.
Why are you going around saying it? Why would you even say it to him, dude? I'm your family. That's
Because I did it, bitch.
When our office heard the tape conversation, we were confident that we had enough to present this to the jury. We finally had him on tape. He was charged with arson, murder, robbery, and burglary. Mr. Crank was sort of nonchalant, that I didn't do this, you got the wrong person kind of attitude.
The defense offers no witnesses, and after just 5 days, the trial concludes.
Chester was found guilty by a jury of his peers of aggravated murder, aggravated arson, robbery, and burglary. The family asked the judge if they would pass sentence immediately, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But there was evidence to show that there was approximately 3 other people that was involved in this whole incident.
And that's why that chapter might be closed, but this book isn't done because I know that there's other people that need to be held accountable.